Oh.
Hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya 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 hey ha yo hey yo hey yo Fort Beck Community College Ukiepino yo yo me too gashi dagush kashka yogi piano yo yo wata pevi hagi ktabi ichachia ya bino hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya yo hey ha yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey yo hey yo hey yo Fort Beck Community College Ukiepino yo yo me too gashi dagush kashka yogi piano yo yo wata pevi hagi ktabi ichachia ya bino hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya yo hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha hey yo hey yo hey yo Fort Beck Community College Ukiepino yo yo me too gashi dagush kashka yogi piano yo yo wata pevi hagi ktabi ichachia ya bino hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya yo hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ha hey yo hey yo hey yo Fort Beck Community College Ukiepino yo yo me too gashi dagush kashka yogi piano yo yo wata pevi hagi ktabi ichachia ya bino hey yo
Homie Takiapi, Ke, Dayanwa Chia Kapido, the Kodie Uspemiche Demie.
Oh.
See everybody. Thank you for joining us on our Buffalo Chasers podcast. Again, we have Mr. Dekshi, Tommy Christian, in the house. So I appreciate him taking the time to join us today, and thank everybody on our webinar Zoom platform. you that are following us on the live stream. Pidamia Pido. Dekshi, before we get started, are you able to share a prayer with us in a good way?
Why, sure. If you'd like, can you hear me?
Oh,
Okay. Hey, mitaki epidaya hippie no wana ke ambe tukile mi chante tawa galake na hana pe chuza pelo. Ho he chaje mita wamnisha ge doba imachi api ushimalo makiana agnagupta. All my relatives, and again, we'd like to welcome you all here. And on this day, I'm going to speak to you from my heart. I offer you all my hand. I carry the Nakona name of Wamnishage, but they also refer to me as four. So with that understanding, as a Kchewi Chasha, I'd just like to ask you in a good way if you'd help me out as we go to the Creator, the higher power, Mwakantanka, whatever you refer to that entity as. We want to ask you to utilize that one as so it makes you feel comfortable and it helps you gain the strength that we need on this day. So Ushimalo mitaki epi omakia. Atukashi la nawakantanka tadeo ya doba unchi makana makaina. Naku mitaki epi wanagi makpea ktayage ushianke hocho kakta hyopo. Ushia ke mitaki epi agnagupta wuchekia tawa naha o ushi wichalapo o wichakiapo. Atukashi la nawakantanka Gixiapo mitaki epi wayaza pi unchi makaumani. Naha gixiapo mitaki epi chante yoksi jomani o ichakiapo ushi wichalapo. Atukashila na wakantanka gixiapo mitaki epi winuk chalapi wichak chalapi na koshkapi wi koshkapi naha okshilapi winchin chalapi chanku washte unk upi wichozani unk upi okiawo. Atukashila na wakantanka Gixiapo mitaki api agichita oyate kizuya ekta. Wichasha bile na wiapile chanku washte unkupi ambe tukile. Aha he atukashila wakantanka. Oyate oyasi chanku luta aga omani o wichakiapo ushu wichalapo. My grandfathers and my grandmothers that I come to you on this day, wishing for you to carry my wishes for the sake of others to the other side, that spiritual energy that helps us and gives us understanding of our purpose and dedication in life on this day. We want to thank you for this opportunity to come at you in a good way to help us understand the importance of our mental health as we exist as human beings in this vehicle that we call our body. We ask that you strengthen us in our mind, our hearts, our spirit, and of course in our body itself, that you help us to continue to utilize these tools in a good way to help understand the importance of our purpose and our dedication as we do these things, and to go beyond the fear that may be instilled in us as a result of our instinctiveness as we continue to try to survive in our life. And so we're going to ask in a good way to continue to help us and guide us as we walk this red road of understanding. We're very grateful and thankful for those that help us to understand the importance of our coexistence, not just with the humans, but the four-legged, the winged, the things that crawl, the things that are in the water, the things that are in the air, the plants, and all of those things that are out there that we can gain understanding from if we just take the time to slow down and listen and share with them in a good way, this opportunity to coexist with them in a good way. My grandfathers, as we come to you, and my grandmothers that guide us, we're going to ask you in a good way to continue to give us strength so that we can continue to remember all of those that are maybe having a tough time today, that may not have as much as they feel they need, but yet in your presence, they have all the things that they need at this time to overcome the particular circumstances that they're involved in on this day. Hopefully tomorrow will be a better day for them. So it comes from our heart as we share this prayer with you in a good way. And I ask you to continue to pity us and guide us as we try to do these things. Oh, mitake oasi wa matashka oasi. Oh.
My next beautiful prayer. So before we get rolling, I guess, with the discussion for today, we like to... All right, he's in the house. All right, we'll just do a quick reminder for the viewership about our drawing. We want to try and promote the podcast with weekly drawings and how you get your name in the hat for those items like the jacket. Actually, Tommy's rocking there the jacket, and we also have a Kindle Fire up for grabs every week. And so last week there was a few individuals that smashed that love button, gave us a like, gave us a share, and so they participated even though it was in a remote way, and so we want to thank them for that. And so there was two individuals that were winners. We have a Kindle Fire tablet so that we can watch this podcast on that tablet, and the winner of that Kindle Fire is Dana Hughes. Winner. Chicken dinner.
Honey's dinner.
And we also have a Cho Cho FPCC jacket. And the winner of that jacket that Dexy Tommy's rocking there, he's going to give his up, he said. So he's going to give that to Kevin Hatchin. Winner. Chicken dinner.
Chupa dinner.
Chupa dinner, gut dinner.
So congratulations to both of you. Get a hold of us at Student Services, 406-768-6370. I believe you can also shoot us an email, ehopkins@fpcc.edu. Give us your mailing address and your size of your jacket, and we'll hook you up. So with that, I'll pass the floor over. I'm glad to see actually Earl Bullhead is in the house. Okay, so what you got? Dokity Duke Chompy.
Hecha to Daya Chanu Toshkai. Hey, he remembered his name today, so I'm glad that that's who he is. So we're appreciative of that. And again, I wanna, ugly. Come back, so we don't have to look for him no more. We found it, so there. But you guys, I've been thinking about this stuff, and I think Toshka Elijah, he mentioned that I have an association, so to speak, with Dr. Drew to kind of bring him up here to help us understand the importance of trying to deal with some of these issues here at hand as it relates to the traumatic experiences we may have realized throughout our life, but to help us overcome them so we can rid ourselves of this antisocial behaviorism that's called drug addiction or alcohol abuse or whatever the case may be. But there's some that have lived this way for a long period of time and has recognized some of these characteristics of the drug abuse and the drug addiction. We need to pursue that, continuing to try to, what do they call it when they detoxify them, eh? So with that, and then once they become clear of mind to some degree, we need to understand where that all precipitates from. And where it precipitates from is this historical and cultural trauma. And, as I think about these things, Chair, I was thinking, there's another peoples that have experienced such things that have hung on to their cultural value system, and that's the Jewish people. And so quite naturally, I thought to myself, well, what is it that they did to help them overcome the historical trauma that they experienced with all the 6 million of their relatives that were killed by some guy that thought he was in control? How did they overcome that? Because they become a very prosperous and in some cases affluent people in society. How did they deal with that historical trauma? And what that told me is evidently there's an avenue to deal with that so that we can get away from that PTSD that we experience as a result of that mental health problem that we have. And the Jewish people have proven that. So there's a way to do it, but it was just not afforded. For some reason, it wasn't afforded to the Indian people or the indigenous people, that avenue. And the reason, and this is what I think, as I look back into that, the reason for that is they hung on to their language, They hung on to their belief system. They hung on to promoting, again, keeping the Jewish people in their bloodline, marrying amongst the Jews, all that good stuff. And they kept on their ceremonies, eh? The thing that they hung on to was that Korah, eh? That's what they read. That's their guidance and their direction. And evidently that sustained them to become strong enough to overcome the PTSD or some of them triggers that they had to deal with, so that they maintain who and what they were as a peoples. Now we have to look at what is the difference between the Jewish people and the Indian people. One of the things is people don't know it, but this is what happens when you take away somebody's culture. And it's that colonization that forced us to assimilate. And please, before I go on, I want everybody to understand this is not a political agenda that I'm pursuing. I have no reason to become political, but I do have a reason to address the reality of it. And in this next statement I make, you'll recognize that reality. And the reason how the Jewish people had an opportunity to overcome that PTSD or that historical trauma that they were experiencing because of their culture. But in our indigenous people, remember, we just recently got the Indian Religious Freedom Act from 1978 on. And so it affected many generations prior to that, to where we were forced to assimilate to try to be somebody that we weren't. And it affected us in such a detrimental way where we didn't really understand the importance of maintaining the dignity and the honor to sustain the integrity of who we were as a peoples. So in that process, that's where my association with Dr. Drew, hopefully we can come up here, continue to respect the works of the Spottable Treatment Center as it relates to the detoxification and that time period that's needed, but develop, when they come back, an opportunity for our people that are detoxified and ridden themselves of that need for that drug, allegedly, that will be able to provide for them a therapeutic avenue from a group therapy perspective to understand and develop and create a support system that would benefit them, and then understand the importance of representing their family, their tribe, their community, but keeping it at the community level. And so now that's why it's not political in that sense. In a lot of these cases, if you stop and you think about it and understand the alcoholism and the drug addiction, a lot of our clients that come into being and dealing with these character defects, if you will, for lack of a better word, it's usually policy driven. And so the client is not the first thing that they want to satisfy. Usually what happens is there's deliverables and there's objectives and these contracts and grants that got to be met. That's what I mean by policy driven. And usually our clients are brought in when they work out a way for all of this money that they receive from another entity to become an allowable cost. And so they just take them and send them to treatment and then bring them back here and dump them right back into their environment. Well, we can recognize those sorts of things as something that has been somewhat ineffective, not for all, but for some. And again, because that lack of a support system, that's why it would be coming from a group therapeutic perspective as it relates to dealing with these antisocial behaviorisms, based on the education they receive when they're in this detoxification, the education they receive. So when they get out, they'll be able to independently make better choices for themselves. Now, again, that's what we're talking about, is what we've been trying to convey to all the people for 60 some weeks, that we're not, the diversity and the uniqueness under natural law should become an enhancement and enrichment for the sake of the growth of our children. Okay, Takia, our future. And in that, what we're trying to establish is a better way of life, or a higher quality of life, higher standard of living for the sake of our future, our children, because we don't want them to have to go through what we did. And then at the same time, utilizing the tools that are made available to us through COVID, and it brought us to and confronted us face to face with this virtual experience we're doing right now. So in that whole thing, through our optimism, we're going to try to utilize and develop these things so that we can not be afraid to involve ourselves into this healing process, but be more understanding that there is an avenue to address it, because the Jewish people represent that. Chie, now, does that make sense to you? And again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to convince anybody, but I would like to share them and maybe change that. Remember what I say, Toshka, that ideological paradigm shift. Hey, yeah. There's two dimes, man. Yeah, we got to change that attitude to help us understand that from a community perspective, not a national perspective, not a worldly perspective, but I think from a community perspective, utilizing our own resources to really affect that ideological paradigm shift that's going to be more optimistic, more positive, more of a healthy way of thinking and making decisions. What do you think, Chia? What's on your mind, Chia? First, I should ask Chia, Token. Can
you hear me? Or?
Oh,
I'm on, eh?
Yeah.
You know, when we first touched on the subject a couple of days ago, I went online and started kind of looking at the geographics of this whole thing and how it progressed and how it's all basically goes all the way back down to the early writings and interpretation of writings that scholars put down in regards to philosophy and belief and religion and all that stuff. And the pyramid effect there is quite, how would you say it, is years of it taking place in the transformation and all this change that came along with it, and all the terminology that's used for the different classification of the Jewish people. You start making an analogy of that, and you start saying, well, if this is the case, you know, we pretty much as Lakotas, Nakotas, and Turtle Island people, we have the same kind of tribal identity as far as our history, our spirituality, our religion. So you have to equate that with the fact is that what are the things that really changed our experience, differentiating from other people? Because that's where the balance is. You got to find it. And so in my mindset, the number one thing was, oftentimes you go look and you say, the only good Indian is a dead Indian, you know?
Yeah.
Now, that word Indian, to me, in my years of experience, it's a hard word to get out of our language. You use it, lots of people use it. But me, I try to focus on saying that I'm a human being, a common man, yeah. Or I can go further and say, you know, you know, I can identify that because that mixture of relatives and friends that were put together in many different ways, you know, like boarding schools, you know, and so you intermingled and it became a melting pot of our blood and our people. And I even got French, you know, we you know, and so my line was thinking, I says, well, what better way than to destroy a culture and to get somebody and to get what they have and they possess so we can call it our own.
Yeah.
You know, so what did they do? They destroyed all the buffalo in the first place.
Yeah.
And piles of them you can see in the history books.
Yeah.
People just drive by in trains and get out of there in nice little rifles and running rifles and shoot them and take the tongue for supper and leave everything else on the prairie, you know. We know all those things now. And so to be able to look at that and say, okay, what other transaction did they think about? And that was, it took for years for them to realize that, we as, how would you say it, the first people that existed on this earth, it's becoming more evident that we were here long before people. Even our horses were here long before that.
Yeah. Way longer.
And they're starting to discover those things.
Yeah.
And so, like, my perspective is that, what goes around comes around inevitably, and it is coming about. But our job and what we need to do as human beings, and it's such a hard step to. I have a friend of mine that was emceeing a powwow, and they brought out this flag, was a huge flag. They brought it into the arena, and a drum group made a song for it. And so as they took it around, my friend started saying, it's a time when we as human beings need to stand and assist and help in any way that we can, so people understand what it is to be traumatized by such an event. He said, we've gone through all that. Our history, our being, our whole presence been traumatized from day one,
Yeah.
So here we are, getting to the point where now we're starting to say, okay, let's look for those little things that kept people together. Like, for instance, the reference to Jewish people. I think that traumatization, what they went through, our people went through here in the United States. They say that's the first concentration camp in the history of mankind, was amongst our people. I stood there in that camp where they were being held captive before they broke them up and took them different directions.
Yeah.
I stood there and I looked around the establishment that was around there, and the area in which this people were camped with all the disease and sicknesses and all that stuff. You could feel, you can feel, that downheart loneliness, that, geez, how can something like this transpire? How can this all take place? And then you go look at the facilities that's upkeeping that place, and you got weeds growing all over it. The paint is peeling off the walls. I mean, you can go and coincide that with many of our relatives who are leaders in our community, and how they've had to repatronize our leaders to take them and get them reburied at home, and even that is a challenge. Jim Thorpe, he never got a chance to be laid to rest in his homeland because he was married to a Shicha woman, and they actually walked in there and she, with arms and everything else, and took him away, buried him made a town and a tourist attraction out of that. The greatest athlete that ever lived, And so when I started thinking about those things and trying to keep their minds in perspective, that it all goes back to individuals learning their genealogy. You got to figure out who you are and find that balance and harmony, because when I got out of high school, I had a hatred for white people you wouldn't believe. When I witnessed these cops using these hot shots on bulls and buffalo or cattle in the stockyards, touching my uncles and them, and they're twitching and stuff, and they weren't even drinking. They had diabetes. And that's another thing that was brought on. And then all the health and sicknesses, smallpox, chickenpox. Here on this continent, we were living in a way of life that I was dare say that it was like heaven. Everything was provided. And then everything from there now on, for achievement or to gain control, you start fencing up acres, And then electricity. Pig Sloan Act came along, all those native plants, even the mice beans, all that stuff we lost.
Political agenda.
Willows,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Pig Sloan,
so we were not being taught the real truth to the books that were put out by non-Lakotas, Dakotas, and Nakotas, and relatives of Turtle Island. It's a long phrase to say, but
Chia, when you talk like that, when you talk like that, what they're saying now, and they've politicized that perspective, you're telling the truth, but what they're calling it is CRT, critical race theory. And what it is Wowichaki Obomani. I'm just walking with the truth, but yet they're trying to deny these atrocities that have been inflicted on us based on denying our people to tell the truth in schools, to tell the truth about to these children in a good way, in a positive way, optimistic way, and help them kind of process it. And so, see, that's a part of it. It's not a political agenda when you speak the truth. It's not something that we're trying to convince others of. We're just wanting them to understand just based on the truth. And then individually, that's why it's important to be a critical thinker. Individually, they process that. Shia, everything you said was not a lie. Everything you talked about was the truth, but they politicized it by referring to it as critical race theory, because the non-Indian people are threatened. The non-Indian leadership, I'm not saying all people, I'm going to say the non-Indian leadership are threatened because they think there's going to be all these people of color that are going to take over that political agenda, and they may actually. So to avoid ourselves from getting political, what we're wishing for people to understand is the information like my older brother here is sharing, and to process it yourself. We're not trying to convince you, and we don't want pity. We don't want anything like that. We're just sharing some truths with you. And we got historically some things. My brother said he was standing there amongst them. He's seen that for himself. He had no reason to embellish the truth or anything like that, but to just help us all understand that these are some of the things that led up to that drug addiction, that abuse of alcohol and all that good stuff, because of low self-esteem, a lack of identity, all these things. And so what we're trying to help us understand from a natural law perspective is to really look inwardly and take it upon ourselves to make these choices. I'm sorry, Shia, that I didn't mean to butt in, but I needed the students to understand it's called CRT. Critical race theory is where what you're saying. I wanted to identify how you were talking. Yeah.
I always remember, that I got out of high school and being raised in early life before going into school was nothing but Lakota in our home.
Oh.
And then after getting into high school, a lot of our people were approached by the Mormons, and so a lot of them went on this placement program. But what triggered my thinking was, I remember his name too. His name was McPherson, Brother McPherson. He come with this knowledge about, the Book of Mormon. Yeah. And the first time I seen it, and I seen it, and so when he came, he started visiting. So my auntie, to be hospitable, just for him coming talking to us, because we as younger people, when the elderly people talk, they tell us to sit in the other room or just be quiet, So I'm sitting in another room listening, and so they're having these conversations about, the history of Standing Rock or history of there. And then he would talk about the revelation they got from the establishment of the Book of Mormon. So anyway, so it got to the point where that social intermixing between him and us, he came to the door and he said, I said, how come you guys don't speak your language when I'm around? And I said, well, we were taught to make you comfortable. And so speaking English, you would be comfortable. He said, well, don't do that. He said, I want to learn too, And so whenever he came around, then we knew he was interested. So we'd say things like, Tumahio, things like that. Well, out of his graciousness, he helped me get into BYU. So anyway, so that kind of started triggering my thoughts about my true identity and where am I going to go with it, you know, like, you know. So in my mindset, something that was said and done many years ago influenced my life. So anyway, so after getting out of high school, you know, that finding that identity, that balance, there was no one around that could understand what was transpiring in my thinking, my way of thinking. And my first language, you know, is the way I thought. It takes me a while to think about what's said and then interpret it and do it. All right. So it became, you know, where am I going? What am I doing? You know, what am I going to be? Where am I going to go? You know, and that transition that I needed to make. So for a long time, I was lost, man.
Yeah.
And the only other resort then is that what's transpired in that time when you're a small boy being abused by older boys in our community, that took its effect.
Yeah.
And then try to hide it underneath the table. Dealt with it later on in life. And that's what kind of more or less saved my, you know, initiated me in balancing my life and saying, all right, that wasn't my fault, man.
Yeah.
They did that to me. I didn't do that to them. He said, that's not my fault. Why am I blaming myself?
Yeah.
And so people need to hear those things. And it is running rampant, man. When I went through that cycle and all these ladies that shared their stories, I sat there and had to swallow hard and keep from crying from all the things that they went through that was being brought to them by their husbands and uncles and, you know, all that, you know, the sexuality and all that kind of stuff come into play.
Yeah.
And it made you take a good look at yourself, you know. So anyway, so you develop that compassion, you know, you develop that sincerity towards what our women went through, our backbone, you know. So I really, you know, in the lifespan that I've gone, I finally found that balance. It was only because after 4 treatment centers, it was only 1/4 time. And the reason was is that they spoke to me in Lakota.
Oh.
I could share my feelings. Tako hey blukshana, you know, Zania manicha he waglakaaki. I could share my language to this counselor. And he was selected as one of the 100 heroes in the history of our America for working with alcohol and drugs. His name was Gene Thinelk.
Gene Thinelk, yeah.
Yeah.
Read a lot of his writings.
And Rick Thomas and Marsha, those are the 3 that, you know, became my, how would you call them, my pillars, so I could lean on them. And they were really, really professional because it seemed like they knew. You know, they said, whoever brought that marijuana in here, he said, you better flush it and get her in, or you're going to be on the road. That was me they were talking about. Yeah. Try to sneak it in there.
Yeah.
So those life experiences, there needs to be shared, but I don't think these younger people or people working in that area are not talking to the people. How did you maintain your sobriety? You know, we got grandpas and grandmas that never drank and never smoked. You know, why aren't those people interviewed? You know, why don't you talk to those people and how they managed to do that? We got grandmas raising grandchildren in homes on their own. And man, I tell you, you know, what little grandkids I have, you know, I have kind of a hard time, you know, dealing with their issues, you know, and especially with this new, how would you phrase it? I don't even like to say the word, but the newest drug that they use. Dealing with that in my lifetime, I don't know much about it, don't even know how to pronounce it. But for us in our generation, it was alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing. Sacred water, you know. Why do we call it sacred water? Because when you drank it, you got dokcha, you know, you got to, and the word for being drunk is itomani, so it came from the word ikto, you know.
Yeah.
Iktomi, it's itomani. So
it actually inkto or wheatko, they said.
Yeah. So you start learning all that stuff, so you keep that balance, and it's not an easy task, you know.
Yeah.
You see that foam coming off a glass bottle, my mouth still foams up, but I've got the tools and the balance to keep it in place now, you know.
Yeah. Perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Chie,
So
that what
how-
you're
yeah.
talking about, some of those triggers and stuff, they refer to them as ACEs, adverse childhood effects, and how that applies to your behavior now, eh? That's what you're saying, is because these things
Yeah.
that trigger you, unless you identify them and you can actually deal with them, quit being afraid of them and just accept them as a way of life, then you start learning from your own self how to address a lot of these pressures in your life as you pursue to try to live a healthy lifestyle. You know, one of the things that's really evident in our communities across the Fort Peck Reservation, anyway, the ACOA, the characteristics of ACOA have become commonplace and accepted as that's just the way it is. And what I'm talking about is adult children of alcoholics. They accept those character defects as just a way of life. And that's not even fair to the people, because they don't know the difference. They don't understand the other side of that, eh? And so that's what you're talking about. That's what they're saying. And so clinically, they do recognize these mental health issues, but guess what IHS don't do? That doesn't provide money for prevention. It'll intervene in under the auspice of life and limb, and that's what we're contending with. So that's why we got to keep it at a community level based on our own resources and affect a change within ourselves from our own communities. And we have 6 communities across the reservation. And you know what, I was talking with Toshka this morning. You know what is really cool? What if each community, Chie, had their own drum for that identity factor, eh?
Yeah.
That would be the focal point. That would be the catalyst to that community belongingness. And you know why I say that? They used to have that in every community, a drum.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line that more drums came in, you know,
Yeah.
family drums, the songs that made that drum, like we looked at, those all dissipated, and they didn't learn the history or the usage of the language that identifies our people with that drum.
Yeah.
You know,
And the
dream
loss
drum
of
songs.
hocha, the loss of hocha, eh? See, that's how important that hocha is to the drum, is that the one that the keeper of that drum, the one that understands all of these ceremonial songs, family songs, community songs, and the history behind that. That's why it would be important to identify somebody that could maintain those things just from a community, just from Fort Kip community. That guy maintains that, and that would be his responsibility. And every time there's a meeting, bring the drum, and then hey, sing a starting song, whatever that starting song. And then when you get done, sing a quitting song, and then you're done. And if that's the only 2 songs you sing, that's good. But at least the drum is there. Shake hands, head you to, huh?
No pay use up song. Yeah.
No, not pay use up. You
That
connect.
song's in here someplace.
Oh,
Yeah,
head you
it's in here
to.
someplace. The
Yes,
New Year
yes.
song is in here someplace.
So there's avenues
Well,
to address these issues, but we never slow down enough to really let it happen, you know. And so we got to take time to really be able to accept a different standard of living that establishes these communities, and just don't do it all. But you come in there from a foundation of take pride in. I'm from the Fort Kip community. I'm from the Riverside community. I'm from the Brockton community. I'm from the Poplar community. I'm from the Wolf Point community. I'm from the Fraser District community, eh? And those 6 communities can and should be recognized by our leadership. But that's a political agenda. We don't want to go in there because we just want to apply an avenue to address some of the social concerns that affect our communities. And then we can take pride in it, establish ourselves. Like you said, that the weeds and all the paint and stuff of, let's get back to just local efforts to really recognize who and what we are and be proud of it, be dignified and honorable to sustain that community perspective. Does that make sense, Shia, Toshka? What do you guys think?
I always remember it was some time ago, I was addressed with a question about, what's transpiring with all the songs and drums and this and kind of thing. It says, I says, the coming of the drum and what we do now, I said, was prophesied by a woman. Her dreams came from there. And it was to reunite a red nation for peace and harmony, strengthen us, and keep us stronger. I said, we've come and done that already. I mean, everywhere around the world, they have brought different nationalities and races all come together for one thing, and that's to be with each other, peace and harmony. Yeah. Well, as time goes, that at some point it's going to change itself, or we have to go back and say, it's all right if we just go sing at the community hall, talk about the song, where I found it, where I got it, how it's used, and imprint the children that they know when to use the appropriate song.
Yeah.
So if the kids hear it, then the history of it, they're going to do it, they'll remember it, just like the imprint they gave us. So oftentimes I think about all these songs that we hear, and I listen to a lot of them too when I get my classes done. I tune into all the drums and see who's who, who's where. And most of them on that I look now, I don't see all the guys that I used to sing with or grew up with singing with, or even been powwowing with. I don't see too many of them are active. They're all generations, 3-4 generations behind. And so most important now is that, to me, and we've attempted to do that here. A friend of mine, we're trying to get it together and do some jamming on Wednesday night. But
yeah,
all that stuff that's, oh yeah, there's an old expression for that, but I won't use it. And so the attempt from us as older ones to do that, and just to use it as relaxing and enjoying the song, so kids can learn these older songs so they can keep them alive, keep them going. Because these newer ones, they're just easy, man. I mean, they don't have that flow. Now, I'm really surprised because, and I kind of liked it all over, because there was a song that I heard just flipping through the songs on the internet, and here these guys were singing a song, and that turned me on, And I said, gee, that's a good song. I wonder what that's about. And it turned out to be a drum group called Wooden Face. They're not Kona, they're end speakers, and they say the words in those songs. And that's the first time I ever heard them singing. I didn't even know who they existed, but I started listening to them, and they have a style of their own. And I said, gee, that's a good drum, But you can imagine there are other drums that we don't see are traveling all over the place, but are in their communities doing the honoring and taking care of their relatives within their own community with songs.
Ugly.
Most of the time now, from my experience, you would think that you go into another person's community and be in a manner in which you pray and sing together. Like for instance, I went to a sweat and here they started the sweat lodge, and here they're singing all Lakota songs, and I thought, I said, gee, what's that all about? I said, and then what was made cool about it, they were saying the words correctly. So somebody taught them those songs, and they learned them and picked them up, and they had them in the right order and everything. So I was impressed. I said, wow, this is really something. So somebody taught them well, and to have that, but yet our own, like some of my students, they've never, ever, they don't even know what an inipi looks like. One little boy said, I go sing at Sundances, and he's just a little first grade or second grader. I sing at the Sundance, So that influence from their parents taking him, and their father and dad and all that stuff, that's very important to lay that foundation in for those tiny kids.
Shia, do you remember that time at Bismarck Powwow? I run into this German guy, that he couldn't speak English, but I know a little bit of German, so I talked with him. And here he started talking Lakota to me. I didn't know enough Lakota, so I went and got you. Remember that? And then you guys were you knew the language fluent. Do you remember that that time? At Bismarck.
Yeah, that's quite a few years ago, yeah.
Yeah, long time ago. And here he couldn't speak English, but he could, but him and Earl could speak. I spoke a little German, so I got to, but him and Earl were just going, man. But he couldn't speak English, but he could speak Lakota.
You know, just on the light side, I have these flashbacks. You guys know who John Connolly is?
Yeah, I remember John. Yeah.
And there was a tape, you know, it had rose-colored glasses on it. The Western singer.
Yeah.
Well, I met him one time. He's just a little bit short guy.
Yeah.
We had we ate together, had supper together after his performance, but I had no plans of going to that concert. My father-in-law got T-boned on the driver's side, and his keys that he carried on his pants indented into his hip, so he was sore and couldn't walk. So they asked me if I would go with my mother-in-law.
He had a deep voice, remember?
That was a challenge, you know. So anyway, so we went, and tickets were, so we sat together, and well, some of my distant relative, Wayne, he was sitting over there with his mom and dad, and I don't know who he was performing, you know. Yeah. But I remember that song because when I was you know, tipping the brewskis, you know, I used to play that and, you know, kind of sing along, you know, and kind of enjoying that song. And you know, he started singing, and he started singing that song, Rose-Colored Glasses. I don't know, he was the guy who sang that. So I thought, I get emotional. Tears start kind of coming down. My friend looked at me. He said, Wayne looked at me. He said, "Okay," he said, "let it out. We'll check you." I said, but anyway, imprinting is so important, you know.
Yeah.
The things we're imprinted with as we're growing up. And some of them we retain and we've lived up to that, but we still have lots to learn.
Oh,
you know, especially in the spiritual part, there's still lots to learn. And I always say, you know, it's going to come about to that point where even in the times of hardship and all that kind of stuff, it comes to surface. Even though you don't want it, people want to show their appreciation, or they want to show their gratitude. When I had that operation, my daughter was in there, and I woke up like this, and I saw her, so I waved at her, and she took a picture, and she put it on the internet. I didn't want that, you know, but
I saw you.
You know, so here I'm laying there like that. Oh shit, guys, it's coming out of it. You know, because the sad part of it, or scary part of it, is the doctor said, "Do you want us to keep you alive, or do you want us to pull the plug?" He said, the surgeon.
DNR, DNR.
Yeah, that reality, you know. Oh, so I said, "No, keep me going, man." I said, "I don't want to go yet."
Save me.
Yeah. So it all turned out to long struggle, but I'm getting there. I don't use the walker anymore. I don't use the cane anymore. And that song I was telling you about, that Nakona song, the Ashicha, you know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sang it today, man. I blasted on that baby today.
Right.
All the kids are dancing. I had them going.
Yeah.
So I got that figured out. Yeah.
But really, you know, one of the things, Chia, that I wanted to mention for Toshka too, you know, we're getting kind of quite an audience out here. And we're bringing this out here. We're talking about these things so that people can understand that this is how we talk amongst ourselves. And we're not trying to prove anything. We're not trying to make a statement per se, but these are in our discussions. We see what's going on. We know what's going on. But again, now, this is where we have to really understand how culturally inept our relatives are, our non-Indian relatives are. And so when we bring about this cultural awareness in respects to cultural responsiveness, that affords them an opportunity to at least show a little respect towards us, even in spite of the fact, or because of the fact that we may not think alike, we may not talk alike, we look at things differently, and they need to appreciate that, because we're not against them. We're with them and for them, and we can adapt and adjust our way to accommodate them, but we're not going to change our way. And that's why, like, look at the benefits that the Jewish people realized from maintaining that. And then what you talked about, Shia, the triggers that are there, some of the things that you thought of, that how we were forced to assimilate, and the detrimental impact that it had on us as a people. But look at like Saint Mary's Church out here, or that one by Red Thunder Road, that was set up so that they could protect the cultural traditional things in the basement, but on Sunday at night they'd have them in the church. They'd have the Christian things. But that was initially created, St. Anne's Church, that's what it is, St. Anne's. That church was initially created to protect the traditions of our Dakota people. Okay? It's stuff like that we had to endure and deal with as it relates to just trying to maintain the value system that we choose to live by. Does that make sense, Shia? I'm sure you guys had something like that in Standing Rock.
There's so much that change that we had to adapt to almost immediately for everything, getting up and, to a whistle or a bell. And then if you're late, getting disciplined and actually brutalized. And then having to eat food that you're allergic to. I mean, it was causing all kinds, and then, how would you say it? Speaking your language. I was fortunate and lucky in my generation, because we were encouraged by Mr. Chasing Crow, who made our outfits to dance. We used to take us all over pier to dance. And then Mrs. McGee, she was from Fort Thompson area, and she used to tell us, don't ever stray away from your culture or language. She said, don't ever let them take that away. But she was working as a dormitory matron. And so the goods and the bads that came out of that, we had to make choices. And so oftentimes growing up, getting there, it has helped us develop our character. For me, myself, it's to look at things in a balance,
Yeah.
And so I, once I achieved that, I said, they used to ask me, they say, how many years you've been sober? I said, you know what? I said, grandiosely speaking, I said, I just don't think about it anymore. Yeah. I'm too busy teaching and, learning and stuff. I said, I kind of forgot that. I said, and how many sweats you been into? I said, that too. I said, yeah. But what I do remember, though, all the time is that when being offered a pipe to sing at a Sundance, I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
20 years straight, the old way.
Oh.
Sing when the sun comes up, sing till the sun goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of, to me, so when they say, I said, we didn't see you at the Sundances. I've been there, 20 years, I said, I kind of like, I put my time in, so to speak. But if necessary, if my kids are there, then I go,
Are
we running out of time?
Getting that time. We've got to turn it back over to the man with the plan. What you got going there, Toshka?
So hopefully you guys can see my screen. There's a few things I'd like to recognize. Part of our culture, I guess, is to recognize the good deeds. We don't want to have this crabs in a bucket mentality. We want to lift people up. And we have a Wea over in the Wolf Point community that's done some really great things. Her name is Miracle Spotted Wolf. We want to give her a congratulations on Wolf Point Community College Student of the Year Miracles. Winner, chicken dinner. So we just want to make that announcement. She's going to get a real cool scholarship, and she's going to get recognized throughout Indian country, throughout the tribal colleges, about 38 of us throughout the United States. So congratulations, right on, Miracle Spotted Wolf. We have a little write-up on her. It's on our Facebook page, but I put it on here, the slide here for us, but it'll be in the newspaper. So if you see her, just kind of give her a pat on the back. We want to continue to support her and encourage her on her educational journey here through Fort Peck Community College. Another quick announcement, and it's kind of relative to the discussions that we're having even right now, but there's a real cool event in lieu of not having a AHEC student competition that we normally have. So AHEC kind of basically shut that down once COVID hit a couple years back, right? So, but what they did was they organized another event called Indigiverse Multimedia Festival 2022. So there's some different categories that you can do: video production, podcasting, and music. We can do some theater, photography, creative writing, STEM projects, drawing, painting. So I believe April 1st is the deadline, but if you read that fine print, there is a stipend for students for $1,500. Wow. $1,500 smacker Maza Ska Ota, you happy. But if you submit your application and you create some content and submit it by April 1st, they will contact you with all the incidentals, but then they're going to recognize the students April 22nd through the 24th through a virtual format. So if you get your name in the hat, I definitely want to encourage you. But here's the cool part. So with some of the themes, you can do storytelling. Man, so if you listen to this podcast, you listen to Dexy, Tommy, and Earl, you're going to be a storyteller, man. You're really going to be able to bring it. And then we talk about other things like social justice, right? That critical race theory, how that's almost distorted, but they're changing the narrative. You can have your own segment on that and share what you think about that. Tribal culture, language, preservation, the history of your tribe, however you identify, all these different things, food and agriculture, so many different topics. And so, but we do know that sometimes there is some limitations with access to technology. So I want you to give me a call, get a hold of us over here at Student Services. We'll hook you up. We have some multimedia recording equipment. We'll turn you into the Dexy, Tommy, and Earl of the future. We'll get you situated. So I did want to let students be aware of that in lieu of not being able to travel physically to some of those events, which I think will happen in the future. We just don't know, man. We're going to get over this, but for now, here's a cool event for you. So I did wanted to recognize Miracle Spotted Wolf and give a shout out to this Indigiverse Multimedia Festival 2022. But that's all I got. Do you gentlemen have anything else that you want to share, or should we walk through stuff?
That Indigiverse is cool. I like it. Indigiverse.
Indigiverse 2022 Multimedia Festival is quickly approaching. Oh,
hey ha ya hey ha ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey ya ya hey ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya 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 hey yo hey yo Fort Peck Community College o que é no yo me tu gashi dagus kashka yogi no yo wata pepe agi ktabi ihaji ya bino hey yo hey ha ya hey ha ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey ha ya hey